Today on Between the Lines, the facts of life, as told by the star of the facts of life, Charlotte Rae. Welcome, I'm Barry Kibrick. Charlotte is known worldwide for her portrayal of the iconic Mrs. Garrett, who cared for a group of young teen girls on the hit series The Facts of Life. But Charlotte also is a Tony-nominated performer who created some of the most memorable characters on Broadway as well. Now with her memoir, The Facts of My Life, she tells a story filled with highs and lows that all of us can relate to.
I'm a writer today because I was a reader when I was 11 years old, and it was...
You do not need to prove your state of happiness to anybody.
Most of these speeches were as much as a month in preparation.
Characters, the heroes in this book, are seekers of truth in a story that involves a lot of
You
corruption.
don't get a chance to really talk about what's real, and this is the perfect thing to do.
Charlotte, it is such a thrill to have you here on the show. The green room was all excited. The crew was all excited. They were going, Mrs. Garrett's coming on the show. Welcome to Between the Lines, my dear.
I'm a big fan of yours. I love you. I love your work.
Oh, thank you. Well, I love your work as well. I'm going to start with this because this has been a theme of mine that I've had trouble dealing with. And it's the actual word I wrote was time. And your words are this: when I think back on those years, they sometimes seem agonizingly long and at the same time blindingly short. Time is that weird, malleable thing that we really do have trouble grasping.
Yes, well, you're a real philosopher. I guess when you go through it, you feel that this is the most important thing in your life, and you wonder if you're ever going to get through it. And then when it's over, you move on to the next thing. But at the moment, you think this is the biggest moment of your life, and you feel kind of like you hope you can rise above it and triumph it.
Well, you do oftentimes. That's what makes this. What I love about this is that the viewers are going to relate to your experiences, even though your experiences are unique. Because on one level, as a famous Broadway personality and then later as a television icon, people think that your life has to be very different from theirs. But when they realize the facts of your life, it will reflect back on the facts of their lives as well.
I'll tell you, when my son Larry said he wanted to write this book, my memoirs, I said, oh, well, I couldn't write it, and I really wouldn't want to do it otherwise, except for you. Really not. And then I thought, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to let it all hang out. I'm going to tell it the way it is. And that's what I did. It's all the truth.
Well, you know, you speak of your son Larry. In fact, this is the next thing I want to bring up. You speak of him with such love, and I had the opportunity to meet him, and he is a wonderful man. He teaches in the LA school district, and what he does with some of the hardest to educate children, he brings them to life and literally takes them through college. And I know that he wrote this book and the pride that you have in him. Yet, what's so funny is the book begins with a problem you actually have with your own parents. And I can tell that you almost did the opposite, because they were, you knew they were proud of you, but they had to keep it a secret. And my mom, who must have came from the same area, she always also had this one issue, and it was called the evil eye in English, and in Yiddish they called it the kinahara. And they were always afraid to let you know how good you were. God forbid something would happen to you.
Tutu.
Exactly. Knock on wood.
absolutely. But I didn't know that until much, much later in life. It was Jean Nidetch who brought this to my attention. It's not in the book that she mentioned it. Do you know who Jean Nidetch was?
I do, because so does my mother. We'll go back to that. She's the Weight Watchers gal. My mother played mahjong with Jean Nidetch. I'm not joking. Back in New York City at the time.
Well, Charles Nelson Riley introduced me to her, and when she moved to California for a while, and I was just visiting California at that time, staying with Charlie, and she mentioned that, and I said, "Oh my God! Oh my God! My mother really loved what I did." And then years ago, before my older sister died, she happened to say it in an offhanded way about, remember when I did Come Back Little Sheba, the play, and she came to see it, and all she could say to me, she praised everybody in it, and she said, "Oh, I have such a crick in my neck. The seat was on the wrong side for my neck," and stuff like that. And after she had passed, my sister said, just out of the blue, "Oh, Mother told me that you were so wonderful in it that she forgot that you were her daughter. She really was completely involved with Lola and felt so sorry for her." But she never told me.
And you know, it was so sad that as you said, it took so long for you to realize that, because it left a little hole in your heart that your parents weren't so proud of you. And the same thing that your sister Beverly did for a long time. She made you also feel very insecure.
I don't know why this happened, but she was a brilliant singer. She had a fantastic voice. She studied at Juilliard, and she had a wonderful vocal teacher, and she made her debut with the Pittsburgh Opera Company at Marguerite and Faust. Got great reviews. Got a manager wanted to manage her, and got her into a thing with the touring with all the summer parks with the a Metropolitan Opera winner of auditions, you know, and Thomas Hayworth, and they were all set. And I think she got a little scared. You know, she was 1 year in Cincinnati at the university, and then 4 years in New York studying. And she met this wonderful neurosurgeon, Dr. Jules Levin. It was during the war, and she married him, and she never really went into the career. And somehow or other, you read the book. I hate to talk about it, but I wrote about it. You know what she did.
Your sister, unlike you, did not have the courage. You had a deep underlying courage, whether you realized it or not. You had to, because you made that leap. You literally, as my friend said, pulled the trigger. You were the one that went to New York City. You were the one that was going to have this career, no matter how insecure you felt.
I don't think I could have done anything else. You know, I mean, I think I wrote in the book that I have short little legs and short little arms and hands. I don't think I could have waited on table, you know. And I don't think I'm very good as a clerk in a department store. This is what God gave me to do.
Now, we talked about Mom a little bit. Your dad, he plays a different role in the family structure. He, as you say, he seemed to understand the value of trust. The way even at this time, even during the Depression and things like that, he trusted his employees. He treated people with a sense of trust, and there was no doubt that his personality rubbed off on you, because you too always respected and trusted everyone in a positive way, not blind trust, but in a positive way. You always felt that there were angels in your life,
There-
and you trusted in that fact.
Absolutely. Even to this day, there are angels in my life. And I try to be that way with other people too, of course. But I mean, it's amazing. And well, in the book, I tell all about it. And it's true. And I'm so lucky.
Well, you know, you even mention of not Betty, your sister, but a new Betty in your life who's a friend. And many people, as they age, they don't get a chance to make new friends. But you're still making even new friends, and you call them angels as well, who seem to give you the strength and stamina and the desire and with enthusiasm to go on.
This is true. And then, of course, you know, I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Well, that I was going to bring up, because that's the part that I think shocked me the most, that you were, and I guess if you're a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, you still considered an alcoholic. You really, especially at a time when you first got married to John, you were drinking heavily.
Well, John and I, like for example, we met at the summer resort, and we were drinking at the bar, and he came from a family where they drank, but they weren't drunks, you know. And then he said, you know, it's cheaper if we buy a bottle and go up to your room. So we did that, and then we would drink and drink and drink and have a good time, a jolly good time. And he was he was a composer and a pianist and a conductor, and we had so much in common. We had so much to talk about and laugh about and do, and we'd sleep over, and then in the next morning, we were young, and we'd just get a cup of coffee and get on our way and go on and do all the work at the summer resort that we had to do, you know, singing, and he would do the music and so on and so forth. But I mean, that was the beginning of the drink. Well, it really actually started in college with Paul Lind and everybody. We would go to Howard Street because Evanston was dry, Northwestern University. We'd go down to Howard Street, which was the borderline to Chicago and Evanston, and have Boilermakers, you know, whiskey and beer on the side. Oh my God.
Now, Charlotte, I know how sensitive you are, so there's going to be two topics that actually dominate in the book, but if you feel uncomfortable talking about them and you'd rather have the reader read it, I'll let them slide, but I have to bring it up just because they were important. And the first one is, as your son Larry, who is this wonderful writer and teacher, you also have another son, Andy, who at the time when he was born, they didn't even realize what this was called, but he was and is severely autistic and some aspects of even schizophrenia. And you had such love for him, and so did your husband, John, but it was brutal at that time that no one even understood what this was about.
No, not even the pediatrician, I'll tell you. He said, he'll probably talk in sentences when he gets to be 6. I mean, he had no concept. Nobody knew, and there were no services, no knowledge, no support, nothing. And then a wonderful woman came into my life. I just kept going to the Child Development Center, and I kept weeping and weeping to the head of it, Dr. Alpert, a woman. I said, what are we to do? Finally, she said, you know, there's this wonderful woman who teaches at the Bank Street School, and she works at Bellevue with deviant children, she called it. That's what they said.
Well, yeah, they did, like you said, they had no name for autism. They either called it deviant, they called them retarded, whatever name that was common in that time, but they had no idea that this was a real mental illness that if actually they could catch sometimes early, they could treat, but like you said, they had no idea even it existed.
No. And she said that when she comes to visit the Child Development Center, I introduce her to Andy, and he climbs on her lap and is very affectionate, and she likes him very much. Mrs. Pfeiffer worked with Anna Freud, the daughter of Sigmund Freud, in London. And she was a refugee from Vienna, from the Holocaust. I mean, she wasn't I think she got over here before. Thank God she wasn't a victim. And she had this Viennese accent, and she looked like Mammy Yoakum.
Speaking of which, one of my favorite roles that you created on Broadway, just for the record, but go ahead.
I mean, she was very physical with the children and everything. Oh, Mrs. Strauss, I love Andy. I love him. I think we can do a lot for him. Now, we put them together in a small space, so they have to smash into each other, and they have to have contact with one another. We don't give them too much space, and so on and so forth. I mean, she was one, and she kept saying, Mrs. Strauss, do not feel guilty. You have done nothing wrong. You are wonderful for him. I take cues from you. You have wonderful ideas. She just kept making me feel, I wanted to give up my career. And at one point she said, no, you go on and bring so much to your son. No, do not do that. She was incredible.
Charlotte, there is nothing more difficult than dealing with a child that you love so much, and and that's what I think what made this woman so beautiful was when she relieved you of that guilt, because you can't help but feel that guilt. And another thing then happens in your life, and again, I know that if you feel only let the reader read it, that's okay with me, but your husband comes out and admits to you that he's bisexual and has a gay lover. And that's another thing that you now have to incorporate. And this is, I believe, occurring while you're really, again, in the swing of things and the facts of life, or very close to that time. Was it before or after?
Before.
Before. That has to, I don't think it's as hard necessarily. I can't judge either way, but it must be difficult nonetheless.
Well, I didn't think I'd ever have anything as traumatic as the shock of finding out about Annie's condition, but this was a total shock to me. I had no clue. I mean, it was very hard. It was very hard. However, it took time to accept, and when I accepted, I realized how horrible it must have been for him to be hiding his feelings. Fortunately, I was his, as we call in AA, his Eskimo. I led him into Alcoholics Anonymous. He had his liver had gotten too big, and the doctor said he couldn't drink anymore. And he was very upset because, your bottle is the most important thing in your life. It's your, well, whatever. And so he didn't want to go to AA. So I said, this was before he told me about his bisexuality. He said, I said to him at one point that because we were having difficulties, that he really ought to go to AA. So he went to Al-Anon instead. And Al-Anon is the sister for the friends or relatives of the alcoholic. to help them know how to handle the alcoholic. And John kept standing up and complaining about me and talking, and they say, sit down and listen. And then finally, one day they said, you don't belong in this room. You belong in the AA room. And he went and he hated it, because there was homilies on the wall. You know, think, and first things first, and easy does it, and all these wonderful things that are so homey, but so true. Eventually, he fell in love with it, was passionate about it. And a couple of years into the program, the sponsor said to him, John, you're going to have to tell your wife. I have to do this. And so he did. And he told me, and he slept like a baby that night. And the rest is in the book.
Well, you use this line that we really don't get to write our own script in life. And as an actress, who knows that better than you? But we don't. We have to always be prepared to make adjustments, to change directions.
To be flexible.
To be flexible.
Absolutely, and that's what I've learned in AA, to be flexible. And I've learned in AA, believe it or not, like with a blink of the fingers, I can change my attitude. If you know, sometimes you go under and negative, and you can change your attitude just like that. You can change it. You get equipped to realize what you're doing.
Oh, that if only everyone could do that. They have the power to, if only they could take the advantage of it. Now, of course, every viewer here, if I don't mention the facts of life, they're going to kill me. So we've got to discuss this briefly. I know we're almost out of time, but the one thing I found so interesting were all the girls were professional, and you loved that show and you loved that role. But I had no idea that you discovered Mindy Cohn.
Yeah,
you discovered her because you were doing research about a school with girls, and you went to, at that time, the Westlake School. I think it's now Harvard Westlake.
Yes.
And you went to the Westlake School. You met this little girl, chubby little girl at the time, and you hit it off, and you went back and you told the producers, she's got to be in the show.
I did. I just felt that the show was terrific, and I thought that they had all these wonderful Christian girls, and I thought it would be nice to have a little plump, adorable a Jewish girl on the show with this funny little voice. She'd go, well, I think that it would be wonderful, and so on and so forth. She was adorable and very bright, very bright. And it turned out that they put her on the show, and they did wonderful issues with her. Her grandmother was Molly Pecan.
Oh,
What a
gosh.
treasure she was. And eventually, after about 3 or 4 years, the death of the grandmother, and putting the mirrors with the black cloth and so on and so forth, and divorce of her parents, and all sorts of things. And it was a wonderful balance to the other kids. And I want to get back to my husband, John. I want to tell you that we were friends. Once I learned to accept and understood what he went through, because in those days there was a lot of fear connected with being gay and everything, and accepted his partner. And I said, well, he's a nice Jewish boy. I'm very happy for you. And we celebrated all the holidays together, and we were interrelated because he did wonderful things on my record album, and he was always supportive to me, and I was always supportive to him until the day he died. I just have to tell you that, okay?
I am so glad you did, Charlotte, because it's just in time, for our time is up.
It is.
It is up, and I'm going to end with your words. I want to wake up to each day full of gratitude and love. And we are so filled with gratitude that you graced our set today, dear Charlotte.
Well, the time just flew away.
Well, that's what we started with, time and how it can fly. Thank you, Charlotte, so very much.
Thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and thank you all for joining us. Now, before Charlotte leaves, I'd like to leave you with these words from the facts of my life. Be good to yourself. If we aren't good to ourselves, then we aren't of much use to others. Kindness and love start from within. Who has time for hard feelings? Life keeps happening. Why miss out on anything? I'm Barry Kibrick, and those are the facts of life. Thank you, dear Charlotte.
Closed captioning for Between the Lines with Barry Kibrick is made possible by your generous contributions to KLCS Education Foundation. Thank you for your support. To connect with Barry, like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Barry Kibrick. And to contact Barry directly, watch past episodes of Between the Lines, and read his blog, visit us at barrykibrick.com.